Hello and welcome to the Biohack Her podcast. I'm Azra Ulligich, your host and founder of Biohack Her. I'm an integrative nutrition health coach specialising in longevity for women, a health and wellness journalist, writer, corporate consultant, and a biohacking advocate. Biohack Her is a space where we can explore ways to optimise our health to live well longer. Whether it's through improving our nutrition, exercising, cryotherapy, supplementation, technology, and more, I'll be bringing you information and interviews with the best longevity experts to help you understand what you can do to optimize your health, prevent disease, and slow down or even reverse the symptoms of aging by taking control of your unique bio-individuality. Want to know more? Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Biohack Her podcast. As some of you might know, I'm not only a podcast host, but also an integrative nutritional health coach. As part of my mission to help women live well longer, I'm excited to share that I have launched my first Biohack Her product, my Good Gut Granola. I created this recipe after navigating my own gut health issues and struggled to find healthy breakfast options that didn't taste like cardboard. My cranberry and walnut granola is gluten-free and vegan, and each ingredient has been specifically chosen because of its science-backed ability to support longevity. And I haven't compromised on taste to achieve a healthy granola. But I apologize in advance because once you start eating, you will become addicted. It's that Moorish. It's now available for my Australian listeners, and you can purchase it online from www.biohack-her.com, where you can also download a free copy of my ebook, Biohack Her, Live Well Longer, a beginner's guide to biohacking for women to optimize your health. G'day guys, how you doing? My guest today is Toni Baker, a naturopath, nutritionist, herbalist, and holistic counsellor with over 20 years' experience who specialises in women's hormones. Toni will be a guest speaker at the women's only Live Well Longer biohacking retreat that I will be co-hosting with the amazing Camilla Thompson. I thought I'd get Toni on the pod so that you can get a sneak peek, or listen, in this case, at some of the things she will be covering at the retreat. Now, if you haven't heard, our Live Well Longer retreat will be held at the award-winning Revivo Wellness Resort in Nusa Dua, Bali, from the 5th to the 10th of September this year. It will be a beautiful, luxe and intimate retreat for just 20 women in which you can escape to focus on your wellness and longevity, guided by myself and Camilla. Your accommodation and all beautiful meals, along with daily biohacking coaching sessions, are included in the price. I've provided a link in the show notes where you can find more information about what's included. Now to today's chat with Toni, in which we take a deep dive into one of the most important transition phases of a woman's life, perimenopause and menopause. Did you know that perimenopause can start as early as your late 30s? So if you think this conversation is just for older women, think again. No matter your age, it's important to start to learn and understand what to expect when you hit this milestone. For some, it can be a challenging and confronting time. And I get that because I've been through it myself. Toni unravels how symptoms can vary and what you can do to manage them. Some of the other things we discuss are what blood tests you should get to check your hormone levels, herbal remedies that can assist with easing those symptoms, what to expect emotionally as your hormones start to shift, and how nutrition plays a key role in managing symptoms. Perimenopause and menopause are female biological changes that have long been swept under the carpet, historically considered a taboo subject. But more and more of us are lifting the lid so that you know you're not alone and can get the support and the answers you need to get through to the other end. I hope my conversation with Toni helps answer some of your questions about what to expect and what you're going through, and that it's all going to be okay. Let's dive in. Hey, Toni, welcome to the show.
Hello, Azra. Good to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your background.
So I have been a naturopath for around 20 years. So that includes being a herbalist, nutritionist. I recently did a master's in holistic counselling, coaching and meditation. Actually, what I really wanted to offer my clients was a fully sort of rounded treatment, so that we're looking at the sort of physical, emotional, spiritual, just everything around that. So I've worked in many of Sydney's top clinics, and found myself in the area of women's health and hormones. And more recently, I've worked in a couple of clinics in Singapore. I spent a bit of time there. And I currently spend my time between Bali and Sydney, but really looking after an Australian market, Singapore and UK. So one of my real passions is actually for women going through perimenopause to menopause, because I do feel this is possibly the most important time, health-wise, hormonally wise, emotionally wise, in a woman's life. So I have a special interest in that area.
Fabulous, because that's what we're going to focus on today, how to navigate perimenopause, because there is, I think there's some mixed messages out there quite often for women in terms of what is the difference between perimenopause and menopause. Can you explain how they differ?
Yeah, so perimenopause can be anything from 3 to 10 years before menopause. And, women kind of think that if they start having hormonal changes, even in their late 30s, the instant reaction is, oh my God, I'm too young to be in menopause. But really, we've also got possibly early perimenopause and late perimenopause. So generally around that kind of early 40s mark, we might start to see some changes in our sleep patterns, potentially. Our progesterone basically is starting to drop through our 40s, and it does decline quite rapidly. At the same time, our estrogen is bouncing around. So when we kind of say to people, it feels a little bit like being on a roller coaster, that is exactly how it feels. And some of the biggest changes, I think, also include, our moods, how we feel emotionally, just lots and lots of different changes start to come in, and we don't really know why. I mean, we do, but most women are kind of like, why is this happening? Because I'm still quite young. And so I think there really needs to be a lot of understanding of, how young these changes can really start happening.
Yeah, and that's the point, because you mentioned it can start in your early 30s. What's the earliest age that you've seen a client come through with perimenopause symptoms?
Late 30s, really. I think probably, unless somebody has gone into early menopause, which is a different kind of topic. Late 30s, I feel like I see more and more women in their late 30s starting to experience changes in their hormones. And that could definitely be, due to the kind of environmental world that we live in today, that perhaps we are experiencing changes earlier. But one thing I do say is it's never just about the hormones. It's about so many other factors as well. We need to look at our stress levels, our gut health, our thyroid hormones, our blood sugars, and really have a look at the whole picture here of what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. That could be quite scary for a 30-something-year-old to suddenly think that they're going through perimenopause, because I think a lot of women these days aren't even thinking about having kids until their mid-30s. How can women differentiate between normal perimenopausal symptoms, rather, and any other health conditions? Because I guess, lack of poor sleep could be attributed to a number of other things, as an example.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's many different things. And also what you'll find is that, your sex hormones, might be pulling on your adrenal function. So your cortisol, and there can be many different sort of things to really decipher and get down to what potentially is the root cause here. I mean, just on that, women can still get pregnant in perimenopause, or while you're still having periods and you're ovulating, you can still get pregnant and have babies. And many women obviously do these days in their 40s.
Yeah, definitely.
So just to answer that. Yeah, sorry, to answer the question, how the cow can they tell? What I would be looking at is the way that I test women's hormones. I use a Dutch complete test. I find bloods are not really that reliable for hormone testing. So a Dutch complete is a dried urine test, and it's taken over a period of 12 hours. And so we're having a look at all of the hormones on a particular day. So if you were on a 28-day cycle, we'd be looking at day sort of 19 to 22, which is that kind of luteal phase of the cycle. And we're looking at all of the hormones. We're also looking at the estrogen metabolism, so how we metabolize estrogen through the liver safely from the body. We're also looking at the cortisol curve to see whether, there's stress factors in there that we need to support. And then I'd also have a look at the bloods, which are better for the nutritional factors, your active B12, your folate, your iron, thyroid hormones, blood sugars, and, obviously a symptom picture as well. So for me, I like to sort of gather the whole picture and then really kind of delve into root cause of what's going on there.
Yeah, right. You mentioned that you feel that the Dutch test is more reliable than a blood test. Why? Can you explain why a blood test is not reliable?
Well, so the bloods, again, you really need to sort of do them on the right day of the cycle. And I'm not sure that many people, when they go, they make an appointment and they go in, that they're actually catching them, on the right day. Bloods are mostly showing inactive hormones as well. So I think, if you are already on HRT or you're monitoring what those levels, and you just want a really sort of basic guideline, are you sitting in good levels there? Then it's fine. But I think, the picture of our hormones, we want to see so much more from it. Additionally, we want to see what our DHEA is, what our testosterone is doing, what pathways, we're metabolizing through the body. The estrogen metabolism is particularly important, I think, for all women. We want to make sure that women are clearing estrogen safely through their body and pushing it down safe pathways so it doesn't end up in the body somewhere we don't want it to, i.e. in breast tissue or ovarian tissue or something like that. So that's why I tend to use a Dutch test, because I can then, really see a full picture of what is going on with those hormones. And then, it gives you, you're much better equipped to then deal with how you want to treat, your hormones moving forward.
Yeah, right. So you mentioned about how estrogen moves throughout the body in a safe way. Can you explain how that is done safely?
So if, let's say if we were, not many tests actually cover this. And I think it's a really important area, which is really not out there. People sort of hear about estrogen metabolism and, whether your estrogen is high or low and different symptoms you might get from this. So basically there are 3 pathways to metabolize through the liver. There's a 2-OH, 4-OH, and 16-OH. And we are, when we have a look at these testing, where we really want to be is we want to push the estrogen down the 2-OH pathways so that we're safely moving it through the body. And if we see the levels, this is obviously a very, very complicated process, and I'm trying to simplify it as much as I can. So I hope I'm managing this. If we see on a test that these pathways, and we know through a symptom picture as well, high estrogen is often, if someone has sore breasts, lots of bloating, mood changes, lots of symptoms like that. we basically want to then help push this through. And people may have heard of products like broccoli sprout powder, which is a sulforaphane, or maybe DIM, or calcium D-glucarate. These are all kind of products that we use to kind of safely then push the estrogen down those 2OH pathways.
Yeah, fascinating. I actually had never heard of that before, so that's why I wanted to do a bit of a deep dive into explaining to our listeners how that actually works. So you mentioned a couple of the symptoms of perimenopause. What are the other symptoms of perimenopause, and what's the best way that women can manage those symptoms naturally?
Okay. So I think, if we do kind of separate it into early and late perimenopause, and let's say, generally 40 to 45, you might, often women do start having sleep changes in this time due to that progesterone dropping, and also the estrogen kind of going up and down. We start to see this weight gain, the dreaded kind of around the middle, and, you may be eating the same, exercising the same, doing everything you've always done, but all of a sudden your weight is just changing and you're gaining weight here. I think another big one is that there's a lot of mood changes. And so whereas when you're having regular cycles, a lot of say PMS symptoms maybe just come a couple of days before your period. When you're going into perimenopause, these start to get longer and longer. And so even from ovulation, women are experiencing changes in how they feel. And the other thing is the cycles always change. They sometimes get shorter, longer, heavier, lighter. And so you can, potentially, if you're having short cycles, you might get one good week out of the month if you're lucky. And then you feel your body now starting to prepare for the next period. And, so you're spending most of the month with an array of different symptoms there. And then as you get into sort of late perimenopause, you may start finding again this shorter or longer cycle. A lot of women are experiencing quite heavy periods in this time, but we also might start missing periods. We might start having hot flushes. Hot flushes, aren't reserved for when we go into menopause or when we hit that. They're very often those symptoms of late perimenopause. Again, we can experience heart palpitations. There's actually around 100 recorded symptoms and that we look at, so really kind of boiling down some of those symptoms and the brain fog, that is a big one that women start to experience. And, again, they're like, oh my God, I'm too early to have dementia, but it's a worry because that really does change things as well. I'd like to say that gets very much better once you balance out your hormones. And in fact, all these symptoms can. So, I guess how we look at treating this, I think perimenopause is very much a time that as a naturopath, we have some really amazing, I like to use liquid herbs. I like to really personalize that tonic for people. But we have some really amazing herbs that support women's health and really level out those periods. We can lessen heavy periods. We can basically support anything we need during that time. And it's it works very successfully during those years of perimenopause. And the other thing is also making sure that we correct, our iron levels and that our nutritional needs are in optimal levels, not just in the wide, guides that we see in our blood test work. We really need to see these levels sitting optimally. Vitamin D being one of them, it's said that we're okay if we're around 30, but we really need to be up around 100 there, so then we adjust the dosage. So So again, really looking at the full picture. And I must say, this is the time that I fully come in and start to work with people on their mindset and their stress levels. And I think this is a hugely important time to really sort of think about how we do this moving forward, and what our life purpose is, what lights our fire, what are our future goals, because we are going to live longer, and we want to live healthier and happier without chronic disease to do this.
100%. You mentioned some herbs, and I want to do a bit of a deep dive into the mindset, because I think that's a really important area for us to focus on. But I'd like to flesh out a little bit more about the types of herbs that you use to support women through perimenopause. And I know that it can be very bio-individual, but I suppose at a higher level, what are the common types of herbs that you find work really effectively to treat those symptoms?
Yeah, I think so. There's a really nice combination, I often put together, which is supporting the hormones, but also supporting the adrenals. And then, if I'm trying to push in something extra, or, lessen pain or whatever else, then I add in. But, we've, one of the kind of really well-known herbs is Vitex or chase tree or chaseberry, has a few names there. That is a very common one. And it has, it really kind of levels out. It can normalize the cycle back into a bit of a 28, or more of a normal 28-day cycle. And it's helping to sort of lift progesterone levels a bit, and also really helps with any of the PMS symptoms as well. There's some really lovely herbs like the adaptogenic type herbs. So we're looking at withania, ashwagandha, that's that rhodiola, the ginseng, so Siberian ginseng, American ginseng. Again, some really lovely like nervine herbs. If somebody is experiencing anxiety, and for sure, I realized when I was going sort of through perimenopause and menopause, I had never really suffered with anxiety in my life. But as my hormones were dropping out, I was just like, wow, what is happening to me? So it can be quite frightening for women to suddenly experience, the kind of emotions that they're feeling, let alone, if there is really a lot of things going on in their life as well, one of the biggest things is I think that we don't feel as resilient as we may used to have done, So some of these herbs, will come in. These adaptogenics are really lovely to really improve and support our adrenal function, our cortisol levels, and our resilience generally. And then lots of nice sleep herbs. We look at California poppy and passiflora, which is passion flower, lavendula, which is lavender. There's lots of kind of nice support there. And so maybe we'll often just do a separate little tonic to support those sleep levels of well. One of my main things is to get people sleeping well, because I think we all know if we're not sleeping, everything goes wrong.
Yeah, definitely. I had a bad night's sleep the other night, and I woke up and just felt like I'd been hit by a truck. And the rest of the day, I just really struggled with my energy for the rest of that day. And that's probably been the first time I've struggled with sleep for some time now. So it just really hit home how important it is again. For me.
Yeah, it really changes how you function, in the day, and what you feel capable of during the day as well. So if that's a repetitive pattern that, when we start to not be sleeping very well, or we're getting up a lot more to go to the bathroom, or our adrenal function, we get that 2 a.m. wake up with a big spike of cortisol, it really does have a disastrous effect on our whole life.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that you use adaptogens, because I'm a huge advocate of adaptogens, and I in particular love ashwagandha as probably one of my favourites. I take it regularly and find it really beneficial.
Yeah, it's great. It's a really lovely herb. And instead, a lot of these have a really lovely affinity and connection to women.
So you mentioned about how you do the Dutch test for women, and that's one of the tests that you like to do when they're going through perimenopause. Are there any other types of tests that women should consider when they're going through this time in their life?
So I often combine it with a DNA health test, because that again gives us some really interesting results. So I think, we often think that we're defined by our genetics, and that if we have, if we're carrying these SNPs on our genes, that, we have no choice but to accept them. But we're not defined by our genes, and many different kind of lifestyle and changes, can help with this. So I think, let's say that's related to hormones. In the DNA health test that I do, we're looking at a couple of SNPs, which, people may have heard of, i.e. the MTHFR gene, which is a methylation, and the COMT gene, which is showing how we're methylating estrogen. And when we have a look at these, it can very much tell us again and help us with this picture of maybe sluggish detoxification or sluggish methylation or through the body of estrogen, and can give us a lot of information on even how we metabolize caffeine, alcohol, what are our inflammatory markers in the body, if there's, if we've got any of these oxidative stress, so our longevity markers in the body. And I find that that's a really nice complement to doing a Dutch test. And then again, some markers are better in blood. So it is good, to get the blood tests as well. Again, as I said, one thing I think is really important for women, is that when we test our thyroid, that we actually get a full thyroid panel. So often just a TSH is run, and it's just not nearly enough to show us what is going on with the thyroid. So we really need a TSH, T4, T3, and thyroid antibodies to really have a look at the conversion of hormones and what is going on in our body. And there's, again, we need to be in optimal levels there. And, I see many women who do have suboptimal thyroid function, which would be affecting the metabolism of their body as a whole.
Yeah, and that could be contributing to the weight gain and so on. So something that they could tackle from there, right? Mm.
Yeah. One of the other tests I run is often, something that's not talked about maybe so much is vaginal changes. As our hormones drop, many women start to experiencing changes in the vaginal microbiome. So, it's thinner. So maybe intercourse can become painful. You can get more UTIs, more infections, more thrush. It can feel really uncomfortable. And, I spend a lot of time, saying to women about this is like, we really need to be comfortable and open about talking about these things, and libido as well in perimenopause and menopause. Often that takes a dive. So we need to have a good look in that area. There is absolutely no reason why women shouldn't continue to have a good sex life well into, my mother would kill me for saying this, but she's in her 80s.
Bless. Oh, I think that's great. And I think I completely agree with you. Sex is a pleasurable experience and nobody wants a dry vagina. So, ladies need to get on top of this. So what are some of the remedies that you would recommend for women that are experiencing discomfort during sex?
So I think, one of the things is for, younger women, even in their late 30s and moving through their 40s, is that maybe even starting to use a natural lubricant very early on is kind of protecting the internal mucosa of the vagina. And so maybe coming in earlier with that and taking that through. Sea buckthorn oil works really well. There's some really good sort of reports with that. Again, for many women, they may use an estrogen vaginal cream, which works differently to topical, estrogels and things like that. It's not actually sort of entering the bloodstream. It's not raising your overall estrogen. And so that can work very well. And obviously when we raise the estrogen and progesterone, that benefits everything. We also want to have a look at testosterone levels and DHEA levels as well. So DHEA is a hormone released by our adrenals, and it controls our sex hormones, but it also is a marker for sort of longevity as well. And so you'll see, like, even if if somebody is low, it kind of declines every decade. So it's age appropriate, but sometimes even just topping up the DHEA levels rather than maybe going straight in for the testosterone, that it can increase the libido as well. And of course, there are many herbs that we use to increase libido so that we're keeping the whole thing going. And the other thing, really important thing I'd say here, which also normally makes everyone squirm, is in Singapore, I did a deal with a company that produced vibrators and sex toys. But the thing is the more that women can bring themselves to orgasm, the more lubricant, the more juicy they're going to stay. So I think all of these things need to come in much earlier than we have been led to believe. We get to menopause and then we're just going to deal with all those symptoms. I think we need to come in, way, way earlier than we believe.
Yeah, sounds like good advice to me. So mental health can be impacted during menopause, and you mentioned earlier about mindset. What are some common emotional or psychological symptoms that women might experience, and how do you work with women on managing the mindset and managing those emotions?
Yeah, so this is a big one. And I, like you, I find this area really, really interesting, because what I find with women as well, as well as dealing with the physical side of moving through perimenopause and menopause and the transition, what I find with women is that it also brings up a lot of unresolved things that have gone on in their life. And I think, what I'd say with women, they are good at juggling. They, jobs, kids, families, anything that, has gone on. And they have sort of moved through those times really probably not thinking about themselves. And all of a sudden, I think that, with what's happening and the changes in the body, they have to think about themselves. They know that if they don't, it's going to be a miserable life, right? If you're just not knowing why all this is happening. And so I think, for women, it's really acknowledging maybe some of their past, trauma, loss, grief, things that have gone on. There's a lot of relationship changes, I think, during perimenopause and menopause as well. Some of the stats in the UK are like 60% of divorces happen, during that time, which is huge, and I think this is the need to educate men really on what is going on with their partner during this time. So the other thing is I see this is also the time that I see many women just being offered, antidepressants, when actually it's their hormones that are imbalanced, and they don't need antidepressants, and they've not really struggled in the past. So obviously, we will support the physical side, but on a mindset side, I think, I'm obviously we find it's finding what really works for us. But I mean, let's take meditation. If we can even spend, 10 to 20 minutes a day, just really kind of focusing on our body, how it's feeling, how are we feeling that day, what is going on, then that's really beneficial. I personally believe that meditation should be treated like any other practice, and we should learn a practice as such. I learned Vedic meditation, which is a mantra meditation, but it means I can do it anywhere. And I've practiced that skill, and so I can drop in really easily. And I think the research out there on the benefits of meditation for anybody really are really great now. And then, you know, even bringing in some little daily rituals. I love daily rituals. I think they really set up your day, and I think they kind of set it up in the right way. Even things like I get my clients to start their day by tongue scraping, and although it sounds disgusting, it actually becomes really addictive. So it is, isn't it? Strangely addictive. And basically, by doing it the first thing we do when we get out of bed, we're removing all the debris, you know, from the night, and it's actually starting a little daily ritual, you know, and then we can make meditation a daily ritual, or oil pulling if that's something people like to do, or journaling just when they wake up, just seeing where they are. And I think, you know what, you never know how you're going to feel when you wake up, or what is going on in your mind. But even just noting that down, allow yourself a little bit of worry time, you know, for that, or writing down if something is, if there's a lot of stress going on in the body. And I also think, you know what, our body is what we tell. It's what we tell it. You know, again, there's lots of great stuff out there about, you know, how if we're telling ourselves constantly that we're not good enough, or, you know, I can't do something, or we start to believe it, you know, and we've been sort of conditioned by our upbringing. You know, I think a lot of people then, the inner child work can become really important, you know, really kind of sifting through any childhood things that went on. You know, there's many, many tools. And then one of the biggest things that I really love to do with my clients is really turn this time back to them and say, what is it you want out of this next part of your life? Like, what are your passions? What are your dreams? You know, you will get to the stage where your children are grown up. They're, you know, you're going to reclaim your life back. And what is it you really want to do with it, you know? And I think a lot of women lose that purpose underneath those years, you know, so it's time to claim it back.
Yeah, for sure. We do give so much of ourselves to our families and loved ones, don't we, throughout our lives. And so you're also confronted by your own mortality a little bit when you start to get to perimenopause and menopause. I know that's what I went through. And, you know, I really did exactly what you are recommending here. I took the time to reflect on, well, what have I done with my life so far, and what do I want to do with the remainder of my life? And I intend to, you know, live as long as I possibly can and live it well and healthily. And, you know, I think that's taking the time out to reflect in that way and really start to focus on yourself and put yourself first. I did a whole year of being selfish, which was absolutely wonderful. I kicked everybody out of the house.
Amazing.
And it was just me and the dog. Well, this is the thing. It's like lovely, it's perceived, you know, by some as being selfish. But, you know, it was the first time ever that I'd ever lived on my own and just took time out for me. And that was, you know, 3 kids had grown up, gone through a divorce, you know, was in a new relationship, and it was time that I just decided I needed to focus on me, and it was the best thing that I ever did. So highly recommend it.
I love that.
What role does nutrition play?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, thanks. So what role does nutrition play in managing perimenopause symptoms, and are there specific foods that you recommend?
Yeah. So, nutrition, you know, as always, plays a huge role in whatever age we are or whatever stage. But what we'll find is when we go into perimenopause and menopause, you know, we mentioned the estrogen is kind of bouncing around, but as our estrogen is dropping, we find estrogen is actually our insulin sensitizing hormone. So that is why we suddenly may experience quite a sort of sudden weight gain. And a lot of that is obviously going on around our middle, our waist, and the dreaded muffin top, as we all know it. What I really found is, and this is something as when I went into perimenopause and menopause, I really had to address how I was eating and what changes I needed to make in order to maintain my weight. So I think increasing my protein at each meal, also increasing the good fats that I was eating. So the avocados, the good oils, the nuts and seeds, that kind of thing. I was really getting my carbohydrates in the form of vegetables, an array of that. I cut out like the heavy pastas, the heavy kind of gluten foods. Because I just found they were no longer working for me, and my gut health didn't feel as if I was tolerating them, and sort of developing a bit of sensitivity to that. I think including lots of good pre and probiotics, the sauerkrauts, kimchis, that kind of thing, lots of good broth, and bone broth in the diet. We're not denying ourselves here. So I devised a plan, really just because to help women and to help my clients going through perimenopause and menopause, and to really get them kind of clicked back in their metabolism going. And that includes intermittent fasting and healthy keto. So by combining the two, as long as somebody is able to fast, I do a 16-8. If somebody has, a lot of adrenal dysfunction, I don't. I bring in the breakfast still, or, if there are any eating disorders or anything going on, it's fine. We don't need to do that. But just developing a way of healthy keto, just clicking your body back into burning ketones instead of glucose, can really get things started again. And then finding, when we can get back to a goal weight there, just finding a good maintenance plan that, you can still enjoy what you want. I think an 80-20 balance is great here. And also changing your exercise. I think most women will find that they are needing to do a lot more of the weight-bearing exercise, the strength, your muscle tone, doesn't develop as fast as it used to. And the flexibility, so the yoga, Pilates, just moving your body becomes so important during these years. And I'm going to do yoga for the rest of my life.
It's such a beautiful practice to do, so why would you not do it? I'm a huge advocate of strength training, and I strength train 3 to 4 times minimum a week, and I love it, and I find it really works for me. It's interesting what you said about intermittent fasting, because I have intermittent fasted, and I do the same ratio that you do, the 16-hour fast, and I find that it works really effectively for me, especially if I'm feeling like I'm a little bit, starting to get bloated or something like that, or carrying a little bit too much weight around the mid. I find it does exactly that. It really does reboot, kickstart it again. But there's some really mixed views out there. There are some women's doctors out there that have a fairly high profile, on social media, who have differing views about menopausal or perimenopausal women doing intermittent fasting. What are your views on the mixed messages that women are getting around that?
I know. I mean, I read them too. And I think it's very confusing for people. The one thing is, I think if your blood sugars are stable, and you don't go into that kind of hypoglycemic dip, and you're supporting your adrenal function, and you're feeling like in a good place with that, then as you say, you do it and it works really well for you. It personally works really well for me as well. But so my trainer at the gym is like horrified. She's, you need to have the protein straight after your training. And I said, but I've tested this out, and I've worked with so many people. I mean, again, it is an individual case by case basis, and it's not for everybody. And I certainly would never force anyone to do it. I know when it's right for them, but the benefits that may come from it, even as far as just giving our digestion a rest for a longer period of time than just continually eating all the time, leading to overeating. I think, if we doing a kind of 16-8, having like 2 good, really clean, low inflammatory meals in that time, and maybe a snack or 2, we probably don't need to overeat as as many people do. Do you know what I mean? That kind of continuous snacking, and digestion never gets a rest, basically. So I am a fan, and I've seen it work very well for many people. But I think it is a case by case thing here, and we need to check that certain things are in place to do it.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned about snacking, and I think that when you're going through those hormonal changes, especially with the emotional shifts that happen, we can often be tempted to snack more than what we do, or than what we used to. So, that obviously will contribute to weight gain and so on. So I think it's interesting that you say to focus on those low inflammatory meals and those anti-inflammatory meals, so that people can try to reduce that chronic inflammation and really kickstart their bodies again through that fasting process.
Yeah, totally. One of the big kind of things I see with perimenopause is with perimenopause is blood sugar changes. And so women have an overwhelming craving for sugar. And that I see that all the time in perimenopause. And it's literally where, they could wake up in the morning and every meal could be sugar. And it's something they've never experienced before. And so therefore, like addressing the blood sugars as well and stabilizing that as well can often be really important.
Yeah, definitely. How important is it for women to manage their bone health during perimenopause, and how can they go about doing that?
So bone health becomes very important during this time. Again, when we start to see declining estrogen in the body, especially a problem for women that do go into an early menopause. And what we're really wanting to do here is, again, the longevity aspect of moving through perimenopause, menopause, and into our later years, really keeping the bones strong. This is actually a really good case for when if anyone does take HRT, by increasing the estrogen levels, it is actually protecting you moving forward against that. But during the years of perimenopause, when you're not needing to top up your estrogen as such, I think it really boils down to diet and exercise again. And obviously, keeping our nutritionals up as well. So back to the kind of strength training, back to keeping our levels of vitamin D optimal. I see very, very, very few people who are anywhere near where they should be with the vitamin D. I mentioned earlier, that it's acceptable to be around 30 on the test, and we really need to be up around 100 to have optimal levels of that. Of course, getting, a little bit of sunshine or light on us daily. Again, with the kind of sunscreen thing, often many people are blocking it out. Interestingly, when I lived in Singapore, I saw some of the lowest levels I've ever seen, which is going to be a disaster. As people age, if they're not getting it, so we need to make sure again that all of our nutritionals are optimal, and plus, we can support with certain supplements, the collagen powders, boron, the silica, all of the nutrients really that we need to support our bone health there. And I think, it does pay to really kind of start keeping an eye on that in perimenopause, so that as your estrogen is fluctuating, you can see what's happening there.
Yeah, great. What are some misconceptions about perimenopause that you encounter with your clients?
Probably the biggest one is that you can't get pregnant. So
you can.
Often I ask people, have you finished having your family? Because then otherwise you're going to need to track your cycles and, find out those fertile days, because you can get pregnant. Of course, the only other thing to consider is that many women are wanting to have still first and second babies in their 40s. And, obviously we then really need to look at the egg quality may not be as good in our younger years. So again, indicative of our kind of lifestyle there. I think, after 45, the pregnancy risk becomes very, very much lower there. So it's not such a big thing there. Really one of the biggest things is I just think women just need to be educated, or just more knowledge, or even just informed more from their medical practitioners, and not dismissed as if perimenopause is not happening. It's actually, I would say that it's much tougher than being in menopause, and yet everybody's fearing menopause. But it's these years where there's so many different changes going on that you just don't know what's happening to your body, and you don't feel like yourself anymore, and you don't know what to do, and you don't know who to turn to for help here. And I just hear this time and time again, where we think it's out there a lot. We think the media, and I think probably there is a lot more attention on menopause these days, but are we focusing enough on the huge changes that we're going through in perimenopause, And so I said, I think we need to get in earlier with women and really guide them through, from their 30s onward, well, I support younger girls, but yeah, I just really think we need to kind of look at supporting women from a much younger age and really, looking out for what's going on so they're not going through this.
Yeah, completely agree. Now, you're going to be a guest speaker at our Live Well Longer Women's Biohacking Retreat in Bali this September that I'm co-hosting with the lovely Camilla. For those that are going to be attending, what can they expect to hear from you at your guest talk?
Yeah, amazing. I'm really looking forward to coming to the retreat. It's in such a beautiful resort there. And obviously, doing the retreat with you guys is going to be really nice. And I think people will get such a nice, well-rounded experience of everything, because everyone each has their own kind of skill set there, and support and an understanding around what everybody is going through. So for me, I think I'd really like to just go into some of the myths around perimenopause and menopause, and really kind of just start to educate, empower and support women through this, which I think, is invaluable during this time. So, I will cover, I'll definitely cover what we can expect and what is going on here. I will cover a lot around nutrition, things we can take both natural. We will also uncover, anything around HRT, any kind of questioning around that. And of course, I will focus on the mindset and just bring some tools in around that, and some little exercises around really nailing down what we want to do and our purpose and our pilot light. I kind of a lot of the things that we have talked about today. As I said, I think, what we really want to do is give women a lot of support, but really empower them and make them feel like this time of transition is actually a great thing, right? Because it really can be, and there's so much we can do, and there's so much on offer out there. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's going to be great to have you along, and I absolutely agree with you that our focus is very much about empowering and enabling women to really take care of themselves and master their own health, and to be able to live well for as many years as they possibly can. So on that note, just finally, what does it mean to you to live well longer, Toni?
Well, I mean, probably, in the same way, I think I've really changed my mind about menopause since I went into menopause. And so for all those people out there that, think about it as the worst thing ever, I find menopause a much easier time because, I'm not having those big ebbs and flows. I support my hormones. I support my whole body. I'm very level throughout the month. I very much support my mindset. I know when I need more support. I know when I need to kind of, dig a bit deeper on things that come up. I too sort of was going through a divorce last year, so I am one of those statistics of menopause, and I actually, it's probably like you. It was a time that I really decided to kind of dig deep into really working through it, really finding out who I was, and really, what I wanted out of my future. And like you say, I think, it does, our mortality can really start to come up. But, we also have, potentially 30 to 40 good years once we hit menopause, so I want them to be happy, peaceful, healthy, and free of kind of hopefully chronic disease, those debilitating things that actually, we should actually see supporting menopause as part of longevity these days, and not just a hormonal condition that we focus on during that time. So, and I also really support women. I think women going through perimenopause and menopause these days are beautiful. I mean, look at you, Azra.
Aww.
They are very different from past generations, right? So I think that we have a lot to give, I think we have a lot to give and bring to the world. So for me, I'm going to make it a good time.
Well, right back at you. You look amazing, and damn straight we've got a lot to give. We absolutely do. We're full of vitality and love to give, and health and fun and all of those things. And that's something that, I really try to incorporate in my life, and it seems like I think you do as well. So great to meet a kindred spirit, Toni, and I really look forward to connecting with you at our retreat in Bali. So I will pop in the show notes more information about that particular retreat, so our listeners can click on that and find out more information and book that as well if they like to. So thank you so much for your time today, Toni. Really appreciate you coming on the pod.
Thank you for having me, Azra. It was really lovely to meet you and a great chat.
Well, that's a wrap for today's podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And if you'd like to learn more about biohacking, go ahead and sign up on my website at www.biohack-her.com to get a free copy of my 5 top biohacks to get you kick-started. While you're there, you can also check out my blog page for more tips on biohacking. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, you can do so on Apple, Spotify, and Google Play. Let us know if there's anyone you'd like us to talk to in particular, and we'll endeavour to get them on the podcast. Until next time, remember to live well longer.